Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode from Careers Talks. Today I have Brandon. Brandon did computer engineering at the New York University of Abu Dhabi, and after that he moved to start working as a data analyst in Jamaica for around a year, and then he went to work as a product manager in Noon, and after that you currently work as a technical product manager at Beamery in London.
Yes.
First of all, how are you doing, Brandon?
Yeah, good, thanks. Really excited to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks a lot for coming. What I'd like to start with a bit is tell us a bit about your career journey. You did computer engineering, you did some data analysis, some product management. So can you walk us a bit through that career journey, basically?
Yeah, so like you said, I studied computer engineering at NYU AD. It was my full major, so I didn't minor anything, but I took a lot of different classes in interactive media, creative writing. So my first job out of university was being a data analyst in Jamaica, at Jamaica's largest bank. That was during the time of COVID, so everything was still remote, and I knew that I wanted to stay in the Middle East, but because of what was happening with COVID, I actually went home. So that's why I ended up working at home.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And I knew I wanted to be in a technical role.
Nice.
And at the time, I knew I also wanted to be in banking and finance. So I said, okay. Yeah. And then this opportunity came up to be a data analyst.
At the National Commercial Bank of Jamaica.
Exactly. Nice. It's headquartered in Jamaica, but there's a huge presence in the Caribbean in particular.
All right.
So very popular for personal banking, business, as well as wealth management.
Nice.
So that opportunity came up, and I thought it was a nice way to sort of just learn about that environment while still using my technical background. So I did that for 8 months, and then I think that's when things started to relax a bit with COVID, and I was ready to go back to Dubai. And I sort of started looking at different career areas because I wasn't necessarily tied to data analytics. I was still more open. And then I saw the associate product management post at Noon, which had always interested me just because, again, it pulls on my engineering background in some of my other areas, which I can talk about later. And I just thought, why not give it a try? And so that's how I ended up back in Dubai at Noon. Did that for a year and a half around before I came to London, where I'm now a technical product manager, so no longer an associate, as we call it.
Oh, okay, makes sense. What I'd like to ask you about is you studied computer engineering, and I think usually, like, if you hear someone did computer engineering or computer science, they end up in a software role. So did you ever consider doing software engineering? And if not, how did you settle like product management? I feel like this is something I can do, or I'd like to do.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about whether I wanted to do software engineering or if I wanted to stay in data analytics. And I think one thing I realized while being at the bank is that even though I enjoy working in a technical role that's more execution style, I actually liked being more involved in shaping what the actual product is rather than working with the data or building that actual product. I wanted to take on a more strategic, creative role. And I think product management, if you look at the typical definition,
which we'll come to as well.
I think it called on more of the skills that I didn't want to leave dormant on the business side, on the design and creative side. So I thought product management just as an area suited my style of learning and interest more than being purely in software engineering and data analytics.
That definitely makes sense. I think would be a bit relevant here to tell us a bit more what is product management for someone maybe not really familiar with that concept.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because people in product actually struggle to explain it. So especially for someone who's not heard of it before, I use kind of like an analogy. So if you imagine an orchestra and the conductor in the orchestra, so you have all these different instruments. Some of them run on the same rhythm, some run on different ones. Yet they have to come together harmoniously to create this piece of music.
An output,
exactly. a product manager is like the conductor in the orchestra, because you work with different teams, you work with engineers, you work with marketing, you work with sales and your business stakeholders.
Yes.
And everyone needs to be aligned and just behind whatever you're building. And so they almost have to make sure everyone is in harmony to deliver that product.
Nice.
So that's at a high level what a product manager does. So they are responsible for essentially shaping the vision for a product, making a plan behind it, and working with those different teams to deliver.
Makes sense. Maybe I'd like to touch a bit more on how that process works. So does it mean that, I know it really differs in different firms, but maybe from your own experience or whatever, whatever way you'd like to structure your answer, but like, does that mean you have an existing app and then as a company I hire someone after I launch the app to study what are the customer problems and then launch a new product, or adjust or let's say fix technical issues with the existing ones? Like, how does that cycle work? Or is it the people who've built that app stay in their position and then work on the products they've built? If you can touch a bit on this point.
Yeah, so you're right. I think it depends on the company, and I think it depends on the product they have. So you can either be hired to take over a product that already exists, and the work that you do is around improving and building upon it. Or for earlier stage companies, they actually don't have the product built at all, and you bring in the product manager to help build
and you
it.
Still be called a product manager.
And you'd still be called a product manager. Like, it just, what happens is you enter at different stages of the life cycle, just depending on the company that you're going to. So they might bring you in with a product that's already out, or they might bring you into a product that's not out.
Makes sense.
It's more popular to be hired into a role where there's already a product, and they need someone to sort of take it even further. And that could be making improvements, additions, that could be taking it to market. It really depends on the company, but I've been in both situations where I built something that wasn't there, or have taken on something that was already there. So it just depends.
Can you tell us actually a bit more about these two, like your two experiences? So is it both at Beamery where you had the chance to build a product and then work on an existing one, or is it at Noon and Beamery?
I would say between both. Between both. So at Noon, it was more that there was a product there, but it hadn't received attention for probably months or years. So I worked on the seller side of Noon's marketplace,
which is something similar to,
so like at Amazon they have Seller Central. So I worked on Noon's equivalent, basically. So I didn't work on the Noon.com website that we would see to shop. I worked on the seller platform where they can see like their sales, their shipments.
Interesting.
And I was responsible for the finance section of that platform. So basically how sellers understand their fees, their taxes for invoices, just making sure that they can understand their business performance. That didn't really exist before I had joined Noon. There was a basic platform there, but there were so much improvements that needed to be made. And so they actually brought me in just to make that experience, that seller financial reconciliation experience, a bit more user-friendly, let's say.
Perfect. If you don't mind, can you tell us a bit more on that? Like, what's the process looking like? Where do you start, right? You're hired to launch this new product or improve it. Do you go talk to customers, or do you go talk to the CEO, tell him I want to know more? Like, how does it happen, the process?
Basically? So in product management, I think there'll be slight variations depending on where you read, who you ask, but there's a general process that you follow when you ship any product or any enhancement to a product, right? And so the first part is called problem discovery, which is really where you go wide. So it's almost like a double diamond, we call it. So the first half of the diamond, when you kind of diverge, you kind of explore the problem space that you had. So like you say, you talk to customers and understand what problems they've really been experiencing with using your platform. You talk to business stakeholders to understand from their perspective what those problems are. Everyone will have different perspectives, different variations of the problems. But really that's what that process is, just to kind of lay them out on the table and just understand what causes grievances in that space. And then The second part of that diamond where it comes back together
Yeah.
is called problem definition.
Okay.
And that's where you really go through the problems and kind of identify which ones are the most pressing or the most urgent that need
Yeah.
to be solved now. It's really a prioritization and a trade-off sort of thinking and discussion, which is a core part of being a product manager. And once you define that problem, you go into work as to how to actually solve it. So I think when I first joined Noon in that situation, it was a lot of just talking to people in the company and customers to understand kind of what is the current state of your experience and why.
And when it comes to that like converging part of the diamond, I'm assuming you also need to consider the company's priorities, because you might say, oh, like we need to launch this feature in the product. I think it will, and I'm pretty sure you get some retaliation or like some, oh no, like we can't do this now, we don't have. So is it that you have to set a full problem statement with the cost, headcount needed, like if you can tell us a bit more about the details a product manager would mention in that final problem statement to convince stakeholders or to actually start with the execution.
So I think one of the things a product manager will always have to answer from everyone is why. Why is this important to do? And so, yes, like you're right in what you said, that typically what you do needs to somehow align with what the business is doing, what the business strategy is, what goals they have. And I think that's kind of the art and the trick in product management is that so you have to figure out how to do that.
Convince,
sometimes it's straightforward and sometimes it's not. And I think that's where it gets a bit more nuanced. And so, but I think it really just depends on the product, like what details are necessary to include. So for sure, the why, just an explanation of what the problem is, like what your users are experiencing, why it's painful for them, how it makes them feel. That's probably the most important thing a product manager has to answer to and to make clear to everyone. So when we go back to the analogy of the conductor, making sure everyone is aligned and bought in and harmonious, that's where it starts, the why. Why are we doing this? Why is it important? Because if people are not bought into that, you'll face issues and headwinds when you go further into that life cycle, right? And so
that makes sense.
Exactly. So for sure, that's like the one thing you always have to include. And then you work with your engineering team to lay out the specifications from a technical perspective. Like, how many engineers do we need to work on this within our team? Do we need the whole team? Do we need some? You typically work with your engineers just to lay out those specifications. But the product manager really comes with just the context and the why. And then you work with the team to lay out the rest. So it really depends on company to company what that document looks like. I think the most popular one that people hear of is the product requirement document or PRD, which some people agree with, some people don't. So it's variable. But one thing I've seen consistent across the board is just the why.
That makes sense. Important. You work at a firm called Beamery, which is a talent lifecycle platform. Can you tell us a bit more about it? What do you offer?
So what you'll read about us is that we're a talent management lifecycle company. And people are like, well, what does that mean? So the way I tell people is that at a high level and in its simplest form, we help other companies to attract, nurture, hire, and retain talent. So that's what we call the talent management lifecycle, right? So if we think about us applying for jobs, we had to go to some career page and enter our information. Someone had to receive our information, our CV, go through it, talk to the hiring manager. We got interviewed, we got hired, and now we're at a company. That's the talent lifecycle. So we're a B2B software as a service company. So we sell our software to huge companies like Amazon, Uber, Accenture, and they use our platform either for parts or all of that talent life cycle.
Can you walk us through like a use case, for example, just to get an understanding, one of the products or one of the services?
So our biggest
on a high level,
our biggest thing is that we're an artificial intelligence company, actually. So we have our own proprietary AI that helps with hiring. So let's give an example. I always ask people this question: if you have a stack of like 100 CVs, how do you rank them from worst to best? And you find that there's no one right answer. And I think one thing I try to point out is that, well, it's also prone to bias, right? Like your own bias that you're not aware of. And so what we do, just to give one example, is that we take information from resumes, information about you, and we can actually infer the skills that you have based on your job title, the company you're working on, and what you tell us you do, or what we find out about your company.
Nice.
And we basically come up with just your kind of skills portfolio.
Nice.
And we give our clients can use that to help them make decisions about their hiring or who to bring into interviews, because it's a more objective way to compare candidates and take out some of the biases that typically affect the hiring process, just to make it more fair and equitable for everyone, right?
Nice,
Because it's no secret in the world of hiring, it can be subject to so much bias. And so what we're really on a mission to do is to take out that bias and make sure everyone can have equal access to work.
Nice, like purely skill-based decision-making when it comes to hiring, which I think is very fair. Because sometimes you might even see someone from your own country and you're just trying to support them and maybe hire them. Even if you want to be very objective, it might sometimes be hard to be 100% objective.
Your unconscious bias may slip in, right? And I think one of the ways we try to tackle that is with this AI, just to help these companies, and it really helps them make sure they achieve, their D&I targets, that they're being fair. A big part of our platform is that AI capability.
Nice. And you work as a technical product management.
Yes.
Maybe we defined product management. Can you tell us what is technical product management a bit, and then we'll dive into the role and your responsibilities.
So I would say a product manager and a technical product manager are the same in terms of their day-to-day and their responsibilities at a high level, right? The difference is that a technical product manager, their focus at that company, their product, let's say, will be more technical. So to give an example, working on APIs, working on data pipelines with the data engineering team. At our company, like the AI team, you usually find that because it requires a bit more technical knowledge than you would require in a normal product manager role, let's say, they differentiate it by calling the role a technical product manager.
That makes sense.
But it doesn't necessarily mean someone whose title is product manager doesn't work on technical products. I think it will depend on how the company decides to define their jobs. Exactly. But typically, if they do make the choice to call it technical product manager, it's a fair assumption to say they're going to be working on more technical products, let's say.
Interesting. And as a technical product manager, what do you do at Beamery?
So my team's actually interesting, and people are shocked when I say this, but our team doesn't own one specific part of the product. We're actually the R&D branch of our engineering organization.
Nice.
So what we try to do is bridge the gap between a business or customer need and technology solutions, and that can be emerging technologies, right? So if someone comes to us or we come across a business opportunity, like our customer has asked for this and it applies to other customers and it's super important, but like our other teams are fully occupied, with their own roadmap, and if there's ambiguity and risk, it typically comes to us. And we essentially just take it and try to solve that problem at a small level, almost like a proof of concept, with experimentation, with knowledge and technical spikes. It's very much like R&D, and we produce what's called a proof of concept, which is like a small example that we can solve this problem. Here's the technologies we use to solve this problem, whether it be something we already use in our stack or something completely new. And we enable the other team who will then take that on to productionize it.
Nice.
So we very much have a variable scope, and we get to work on a bunch of different things related to AI, related to data and reporting. It very much is a generalist team, which I've quite like. So it's very atypical of what you'll hear from a lot of other product managers who are kind of in one or specific product area.
I think this sounds very interesting, because when I was researching product management, and even at my company at Amazon, you get to see people really focusing on like one specific feature of a product and developing it. Of course, it has its advantages in terms of you maybe become really good at really knowing the details of a feature and understanding it well and becoming very good at that execution part.
Yeah.
But I think this also gives you, like, in terms of, in your case, it really gives you an edge of, I'm not focused on one product. Any problem, I need to see how does it work? How do I convince stakeholders that, we might take this into execution, or at least pass it down to the next product manager who will be now responsible of, okay, how do we actually execute, given that your team proved that this might be a product we can launch and help the business and the customers. So I'm assuming the variety of problems you face and the sizes of the products and the potential end customer is very different, which sounds very interesting.
It is. It's like, but I like it. I've always been the type of person who likes to, I like to do one thing and then just move on to the next. Which is exciting for me. So I think it brings excitement to my day to day. And again, like I've worked in one particular product area before, like what I did at Noon. So I think I'm fine with either, but I just thought this was a nice opportunity just to be able to build my knowledge and expertise a bit more across different areas.
Yes, even technically, like APIs, or we need to figure out how we use AI for this problem. So it sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
Can we delve a bit deeper into like the daily responsibilities? So is it that every day you look at a new problem and you try to figure out a proof of concept? Like what do you do a bit day to day or week to week? Or
So my team works in Scrum. So we run 2-week sprints. So I'm responsible for organizing that sprint. So I will look at the different opportunities that we have, either ongoing or potential, and I'll prioritize them based on their business impact, their customer impact, etc. And I will come in and define what that sprint looks like. So what outcomes do we want to achieve? What are the different work streams corresponding to those outcomes? And we work as a team to define that for 2 weeks. Now, during those 2 weeks, my responsibilities in particular are user research. So I talk to customers where needed to understand more about a problem space. I talk to our business stakeholders about these problems, their experience, their thoughts, and to get their buy-in, essentially. So it's a lot of talking. It's a lot of digging and exploration and research. A part of that, of course, is market research, understanding what's happening in the market with our competitors, with other companies. So that's one part of it. Of course, overseeing the sprint, making sure everything's up to date, making sure everything's on time, and working with our other teams. So because of the nature of our company, we're a B2B SaaS company, we have a notable sales and marketing team. And it's really important to make sure whatever you're doing that will be in the hands of a customer, you work with these other teams so that they understand what that product is. They understand why it's important, because with that context, they can do their jobs even more effectively. So my day-to-day involves just a lot of talking, essentially, which is fine. A lot of asking questions, a lot of just digging into your curiosity. But yeah, it's what you'll typically find in any PM role. I'd say it's a lot of research and talking and execution.
Nice. And is there a part where you talk to engineers to I know that you don't build the whole thing, but let's say it's something promising. Is there a part where you start talking to engineers and finance? Like, how do you interact with the other teams? Or does your team have its own engineers, like the R&D team? Can you just tell me a bit more about that?
Of course. So we have our own engineers. So I work with our engineering manager, who actually leads the engineers. So they're in my team. So I actually talk to them every day.
Nice.
And I check in with my engineering manager, and I talk every day, just to catch up, to make sure he's my ears on the ground with the engineers in particular, right? So just to make sure everything is up to speed, that we don't have any blockers or issues, I talk to him every day. And at the same time, I talk to our engineers as well. So when it comes to our team, we communicate every day.
So every day. When you're building demos, I'm assuming that team is mainly focused on building demos.
Exactly. We all work together and communicate just to make sure it gets done. But within our company, we also work very collaboratively across teams, and because we have dependencies across teams as well, we have to. At our company, the culture is you just reach out to another team if you need something from them, clarification, thoughts. So if I need another team's input because I know that their product person or their engineers would have a good perspective on this, I will simply schedule a meeting with them and talk to them. When it comes to working with like departments outside of product and engineering, like sales and marketing, it's really the responsibility of the product manager to do that outreach, right? Just because the product manager is the one with the context to give to those teams.
Explain the why.
Exactly. So it is a part of that product development process to reach out and involve sales and marketing at certain points. The earlier, the better. But it's the product manager's responsibility to do that outreach and to make sure you get there. First of all, you tell them about the problem, what we're planning to do. But also you get their buy-in as well. Because if they don't understand, it will be harder for them to sell.
For anyone to sell it. No, that makes sense. I'm thinking of the diamond example you gave, and I think you're really focused on that part in this role. And less maybe execution. You give some directional information of okay, if we want to do execute this and this and that would be my recommendation. But yours is really trying to start from a point and seeing how can we really get the information needed. To really build or even prove if this is something we can build and take into execution.
Exactly. It's like it's an interesting form of product management, let's say. I still do the core responsibilities because you're right. For our team, we do go through like solution discovery and build, but just not to a production level because again, those will go to the actual delivery or production teams who do that. And so what we actually like to say is that we help those other teams move quicker and be more productive by helping them. Because also our team has very senior principal engineers who've been at the company for like 8 years.
When you say engineers, software
engineers, who've been with the company for like 8 years. So they're very, very senior and they have strong knowledge of our company's technical infrastructure. We're almost a valuable asset to these teams because when it's a really complex technical problem, they typically call us in to help. So I still go through the typical motions, but it's just kind of a different setup, let's say.
No, because you also need that experience to quickly validate, right?
Exactly.
You can't spend 2-3 months only building a demo and then realizing this might not work because our infrastructure is built in an XYZ way. So you need these experienced people to tell you, if you need to build it, let's do this. Like they map it much more quicker than maybe the engineers in these smaller teams who don't have that overview of how things work overall. That makes sense.
I was talking to my engineering manager about this, and I think we say in our team we need to fail fast if we're going to fail.
You're like the testing phase of everything.
So I think we've somehow found a nice way of working where we will just test something really quickly. If we have to build, we build a skateboard instead of building the car. That's what we like to say. So you're right. I think that's why I enjoy this team as well, because I think if I do move to a more typical product team, let's say, I know I'll be able to call on that experience of just being able to test very quickly.
That makes sense. You started as a product manager and then now you're working as a technical product manager. If you can walk us a bit through the skills necessary to become first product manager, and then I'm assuming the ones you need to become a technical product manager are already covered by technical product manager, but you have some additional skills. So basically, if you can tell us how can you or what are the skills that make you an eligible candidate or a qualified candidate to apply for a product manager role?
So I think there's some core skills that any product manager should have. The first one is problem solving. And I know we say this and it just sounds like problem solving, but really and truly, you actually need to know how to solve problems. And what I mean by that is you need to know how to take a complex problem and break it down into first principles. So at the core of this complex problem, what is someone actually trying to do or achieve? I think we take for granted how difficult that can be, especially in the world of product. So I would say that's probably number one. You need to have a strong business acumen, I would say. So I think you need to understand basic business principles and metrics, not thoroughly, but when you make decisions, you work a lot with business metrics, and you're working for a business who is tracking that.
Like
so
marketing click-through rate, like
exactly.
What does click-through rate mean?
Exactly.
Or sales, I don't know. Yeah.
Sales conversion rate,
Yeah.
revenue,
Yeah.
all these things you will typically come across.
Yeah.
So it's important to have that acumen. Communication is a super interesting one because it's not just about speaking well or writing well, but how do you communicate, once again, something complex to customers? How do you communicate that same thing to our internal teams like sales and marketing?
Yeah.
How do you communicate that to your engineers? There are slight differences in how you tell a story depending on who's listening to that story, because you want them to care. And for them to care, you need to know why they should care.
Yeah.
What do they care about? That's an art in communication that I don't think I really noticed until I became a product manager. So I would say that's super important. And probably the most important, in my opinion, is, and I don't know if we call it a skill, but it's having empathy. So it's emotional, but why it's important in product management is because you need to really feel or be able to empathize with customers when they experience problems or pain points or anything that makes them dissatisfied, right? Because that's how you really find the motivation to want to solve that problem. That's how you build the case to solve that problem. And that's really how you also make the case to other people.
Yeah.
So you really have to understand what that customer is feeling, why they're feeling it that way.
Yeah.
And just lend that empathy to them, that you've listened and that you're going to do your best to solve that problem.
Solve it. Yeah. No.
So I would say those are like the core skills
That makes sense.
across any product manager.
Yeah. And let's say, an economics graduate or a civil engineering graduate.
Yeah.
And I'm considering to apply to product management.
Yeah.
Is it possible? Let's start with that and then
Yeah, it for sure is possible.
Okay.
Like, of course, I think there's this misconception I've seen that you need to come from some form of technical background to go into product.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely not true.
Okay.
There's a lot of people at my company who studied physics, marketing, economics, and they're in a technical product management role.
Technical.
Wow. So these are people in my immediate team, but also product managers as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for sure, like, I don't think you need to have a particular degree or background to go into product management.
And how do you bridge that gap? Like, let's say I'm an econ student. I probably don't know anything about software engineering or data. Like, I'm assuming, of course, the requirements or that the threshold is a bit lower when it comes to companies hiring graduates. But are there any courses or resources that you recommend?
Yeah.
For me, when I'm walking in an interview and someone like asks me something related to product management, I don't I don't know anything. Like, is there anything someone can do that is non-technical first? We can start with that.
Yeah. So I think for someone who's coming from a non-technical background and doesn't really know much about product, I think the first thing you need to do is to really understand what it is and what are, again, those core skills that you need. What does a product development lifecycle look like?
Yeah.
Just these basic concepts that you don't necessarily need to nail and know by heart, but just to have an understanding.
Yeah.
I think that's important if you're applying for a product role, because I think from my experience, that's the expectation of the recruiter, the hiring manager, right? That you at least know what it means to be a product manager.
Yeah.
And, you know, resource wise, there's a lot of online courses about product management, and a lot of them are free and actually quite good.
Nice.
So I've seen the ones on like Coursera and LinkedIn Learning, and they're quite good with just teaching you the basics. Exactly. And so, yeah, I think there's like a plethora of information online now about product.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's coming from a non-technical background and doesn't have direct experience in it, I always tell them just to learn a bit about what it is, what it looks like, what the day-to-day looks like, because before they go into interviews, I think they need to understand how they tie their experiences to a product manager role without it being direct. More so like what skills are transferable
from the ones you mentioned, like communication. You wrote I don't know, research paper to convince someone about something, or
like how did you get buy-in?
Proposals on exactly.
So if someone was a researcher, right, like if you're applying for a grant, how do you convince some organization
For
that
example.
you deserve that grant. What was the why behind it?
Yeah.
That's a clear case in product management as well,
Right.
because that part of product management is research also.
Yeah.
So these things are transferable, but you just have to be able to tell that story.
Nice.
So yeah, I would say online, the courses, articles on tech websites, they tend to be quite spot on when it comes to just, the basics.
Yeah. From your experience, what did you do and what was the most helpful to like from, I know you did the data analyst role, which might have helped, of course.
Yeah.
But like when you applied, we'll touch on the interview process, but a bit from these things you mentioned, courses, like what do you think was the most helpful? Is it your degree or is it the readings you said? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I actually think it was the research that I did in the area. Yeah, I was reading a lot of online articles about product management and what it is. And I bought into that, which is why I ended up applying. Yes, I think my degree helped with just having a technical foundation. I think working at the bank is where I've probably first heard of product and could understand retrospectively. I actually just ended up reading a lot online and just doing that research.
That makes sense. Let's delve a bit into the interview process. So how does it work usually? Maybe you can give an example from Noon or Beamery. Like, what are the steps usually for the product manager role?
Yeah.
And how do you prepare for each of these steps?
Yeah. So the specific number of steps will depend on the company, but typically what you find is that you'll have a first interview with whoever the manager will be. So it will typically be a product director. And that's where they just kind of understand what your experience is. And that can be in product. If it's not product, they're trying to figure out why your experiences can help you succeed in product. So that's typically the first interview. The middle interview or interviews, let's say, are there to directly test your skills as a product manager. So, and this can come in different forms. So I remember in one company I was recruiting for that I ended up getting an offer from, that was a case study. So similar, if you go into consulting, right, you do these case studies, they're very similar in product. So they'll give you a very broad, high level problem statement. So I remember one I did was like, there's a rental crisis in London, as there is now. There are lots of people, there's a high demand and there's a high supply. And you might, and it's weird because you're like, well, if there's a high demand and a high supply, then why is there a crisis? And that was it. They said, how would you address this rental crisis?
Wow.
So it's a very broad statement, right? And that can take you in so many areas. But once again, what they're trying to make you do, and this goes back to problem solving in particular, is like, how do you take this broad statement and work it into a narrowly defined
product or
solution, right? And so how do you do that? You ask questions. So in those interviews, they actually do not give you all of the information on purpose. Because they want you to ask. So, they're testing, how do you kind of go down, deductive reasoning? Like, how do you narrow down this broad statement? What type of questions do you ask? What assumptions do you make? Because you can make assumptions in these interviews. So they really just want you to go through this journey of product development within a 45-minute time frame. And there's no right, there's no wrong way to do it. They're just trying to see how you think. And so, those middle interviews will typically always be testing these product skills.
That makes sense. And how to prepare for that? Is there like a certain resource you used or?
Again, I tend to read. I would always read on tech blogs that specifically
like
write
Medium
about product.
Or,
Medium is one. Mind the Product is a really good product group, and they write really helpful articles. Hacker Noon, very popular tech website. They have good articles on interview process.
Nice.
So I would say for case studies in particular, the same in consulting, practice really helps. Just to practice with a friend or a family member, like that really just gets you used to talking out your thoughts, asking questions. So that's what I would recommend. But otherwise, that's like, if they don't do one case study, they might break you into separate interviews. So like one interview tests on product discovery, like how would you go about like defining that problem. One will test you about like user experience. One will test you about solution discovery. It depends on the company. Some might put them together. Some might separate them.
Yeah.
So I'd say for those middle interviews, you just need to be aware of the stages of the product life cycle and know how you kind of tackle them.
Yeah.
And then the last interview is usually a culture fit. So you would have to do research on the company. What are their values? To see if it's, you know, something that's a fit for you.
Yeah.
And then they're trying to figure out, the same.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's typically how all my interviews were when I was looking.
No, that makes sense. I think I'll add one resource I've personally used when applying to product management role is this book called Crack the Product Management Interview. And it was very useful where it like shows you the questions, but also shows you like how to answer them, what structure to use, what information to touch on. Cause like, as you mentioned, the problems they usually ask you are very broad.
Yeah.
And this book, I think, kind of helps you understand what do they really need to hear from you as a candidate to know like, okay, he knows a bit. We can hire this person basically.
Yeah, exactly. I think when you're answering in these case studies, what you're basically doing is going on a journey of telling them the who, the what, the why, you know, the when and the how.
How you'll do it. And if it's structured enough, it makes sense.
Exactly.
Because there's millions of ways to do it.
Exactly.
That definitely makes sense. We covered the essential skills needed for a product management role. What additional skills or qualifications do interviewers look at when it comes to the technical product management? And then we'll also move to the interview process if there's anything additionally asked about that is not asked in the interview for product manager role.
Yeah, so again, like a product manager and a technical product manager have the same core responsibilities.
Yeah.
With a technical product manager, you are expected to have a bit more technical expertise. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to know how to code applications, but you need to have a strong understanding of concepts in software engineering, like APIs, for example. So, you know, additional skills in that case is that you do need to have a bit of a technical acumen. So it's helpful if you know how to code, or you've worked with some form of code, or you've worked in some data analytics or software engineering role, or some tech role that'll expose you to those concepts. It's not a must to go into technical product management, but it definitely gives you an up in the interview, or to even make it past the screening if you have some form of engineering or computer science background.
I think for me, like if there's someone who's doing economics now and they want to get into technical product manager as a student, it's going to take you time to graduate and then learn everything tech related and data related, rather than making use of the 4 years that you have to study computer science or computer engineering, which both degrees for sure cover basics of tech like data structures, coding, even sometimes data analysis. And so this might be helpful. And in the interview process, how do they test these technical skills? Because you said you don't need to code.
Yes.
So is the questions like, tell me what are the different data structures? Like, how does that work?
So at least in my interviews, I never got asked direct questions like that. What they will ask you though, for example, I'll give you one they asked me at Beamery, is like, how have you used technology to solve a new problem? Like the questions they will ask you are trying to look at how you've identified a technology and used it to solve some business or customer problem. So it will come out in the questions.
That
usually.
makes sense.
So they've never asked me like what
very
is an
technical.
API.
Okay.
They've just kind of asked what they're trying to figure out is what's your familiarity with technology, right? Either through your work experience, through your degree. They just want to kind of verify that you can grasp these concepts at a high level. You don't need to know everything.
Expert in APIs or machine learning engineer
They just need that confidence that you're familiar enough.
That makes sense. And
it works. It's a benefit both because, for example, in my team, we talk about the nitty-gritty of our technology in our team, again, because I work with really senior engineers. And so I think my engineering background helps me to follow those conversations. Not to say that's the day-to-day experience of other technical PMs, but it has helped me.
I think it also depends on the role. They might say in the requirements, we need someone familiar with XYZ concepts, like very good understanding of cloud, or like a minimum cloud degree.
Which they do,
which depends on the role and what they need from that candidate.
Yeah, exactly. You'll typically see it defined, like which specific technologies you would need for sure to have some familiarity with.
Yeah. I think what would also help the audience understand what product management is. How would you compare it to one, consulting, and two, project management? Because there's like project management, product management, and people get confused. So
so I'll do product and project management.
Okay.
People get really confused.
Yeah, even firms sometimes, I feel, with the naming of the role, you like
get super
get hired for project management, or like you end up doing the other thing. So
so if you think about a project manager, as the name says, they oversee some project, right? Whatever it may be, and they're responsible for the on-time execution of that project. So they're responsible for bringing in the different teams who have some form of responsibility into that project, making sure that their pieces of work get done at the right times. Just once again, so that project is successfully executed. That sounds kind of similar to what a product manager does, right? But the scope is very much different. So product managers don't necessarily work on a project, right? Because projects can be cross-functional,
or multiple products integrated,
or integrated into one, right? So the scope is different, where a product manager, yes, they are responsible for these things, like making sure people are aligned, but you are focused on, as the name says, a product. And people get confused because they think it's like a physical product, or they think it's the whole app. But that's not the case. A product can be like one feature in the app, right? Like a drop-down menu, that can be a product. And so at any point in time, like your team is working on a product and you're responsible for launching that product. But that's not necessarily a project, right? That could be a part of a bigger project run by someone else. So their responsibilities can be very similar, but the scope of what they do is very different, or can be different.
I think also product manager really is involved into understanding the product, going to the things that you mentioned, which project management doesn't typically do.
Exactly.
So that makes sense.
So they're similar in terms of the execution part, but I think with product at least,
there's multiple other lenses you need to
there's different hats, more hats you have to wear.
That's the word. As for consulting, how do you think it differs?
I think the way that consultants think is very similar to how you think in product management, right? Like, when you have this complex problem or situation and you need to navigate how to solve it, you're looking at data, you're talking to your clients just to understand and get that context. Very similar, right? But once again, in product, at the end of the day, you're launching something to a bunch of users, right? So a project, let's say in this case, doesn't just end. Similar in consulting, where you close a case,
provide the recommendation to your client, customer, and that's it.
And in product, you are responsible for that product even after it goes live, because let's be real, there will always be more you can do, or that you should push yourself to do. And there's feedback to get from customers. There's a reason it's a cycle, because even if you launch, let's say the iPhone as an example, you end up going back to the beginning of that process when it's time to make a new one. So I would say in product, it's a cycle.
A lot of reiteration, a lot of extra steps that consultants might not take, which is talking to engineers and building a demo, getting a buy-in from stakeholders and presenting the information. I think it looks a bit different from what consultants do, where it's like more of a recommendation. Okay, we get the data. There's no multiple cycles, iterations. We analyze the data. We maybe talk to the customer and the client a bit, and then that's our recommendation, and that's it. You're like really stuck with this problem, and you need to figure it out and solve it before you move on to the next steps. Going on a bit of a tangent here. You shifted from Dubai to London. First of all, why did you do the shift? And then we could touch a bit on the different aspects and how your experience was different in these two countries.
I think it was, there were two reasons. I think the first is that, I was in the Middle East for nearly 6 years at that point, including NYUAD. And I wanted a change of scenery. And most of my close family live in London. So the city has always been close to me anyways. And so I think a part of me just wanted to be closer to them. Which was London. But at the same time, in terms of my career, like London is just a huge hub for business and technology, if not the biggest one in the world. And I wanted to develop my skills in that environment. Especially in the world of tech, you know, the startup scene here is massive. And so I knew that I think it would have been a good move career-wise to build my product management skills even further here. Just because, in my opinion, I think that would better prepare me longer term. So I took what I learned at noon and just kind of built on it here.
And like different life aspects for you, like how was it different in terms of lifestyle, pay, like what were the aspects that you felt, oh, this is different here?
I mean, the pay for sure is different. When you pay taxes, it's very different. I prefer the lifestyle here, let's say, which I know a lot of people might not say, but I like being able to walk around. I like to be able to go into parks, take public transport to get anywhere. I never liked having to drive or take taxis everywhere. So there's a more human element to living in London that I at least valued a bit more. And it's such a cosmopolitan, diverse city. There's so much you can do. So I just knew living here and having been here, because even when I was working in Dubai, I would pop in and out. I've always enjoyed being here. I've always felt happy here. So I think it just made sense at the time. I had my personal reason. I had my kind of career reason. And so I made the decision that I would probably eventually move here.
Makes sense. And for someone who is, like in your case, like a few years of experience, or someone who's just graduated, do you have advice on where they should launch their career? Like if they had the choice to go to London, should they definitely choose London given what you mentioned, the more advanced labor market, and maybe the concept of product development is more mature in London-based companies? That, like, if you can touch a bit on that, like what's your advice?
I would say, so I think like there's no right answer, right? I think it depends on what the person wants to learn. So again, like the benefits of London is that especially in business and technology, this is the place, right? This is where you'll find all the emerging trends, the emerging jobs. So I think strategically, if you're in London, you're very likely to be in the midst of that, which may be good for your career. And if you like being in a diverse, big city, like the city life is for you, then I always tell people like, London is great. But I also warn them that London is expensive, you know, like compared to other countries. Like if you do the conversion literally, the pay might be lower.
Usually from Dubai to London, it's a pay cut usually. Because there's the taxes, there's the higher expenses. Of course, person to person, company to company, how your lifestyle is, it's different. But maybe for the audience to know that, like with the taxes, net to net, if you live the same lifestyle, usually it's a slight pay cut until maybe you become more senior or that makes sense. Last two questions are, what are your future career goals? Like for you, and you work as a technical product manager, what are your future career goals? Or another question you can answer is, what could be some exit opportunities for a product manager? Whatever you'd like to answer.
So I can answer both actually.
We can do that.
So for me, I know that like my kind of mid to long term goal, I want to stay in product. I want to work towards being a senior product manager. It doesn't have to have technical in the title, but I want to be in that senior level. And eventually I want to work my way to the product director level. So where I kind of oversee the strategy for multiple product areas.
So you work,
rather than one.
there's multiple product managers that work under you, I'm assuming in that case, when you become a director or a senior even, or...
so it depends. Like for senior, usually, depending on your company, maybe one or two people report to you. But you're also embedded in a team. So it's almost like a double duty in a way. Whereas the product director oversees all of those teams, and oversees the strategy for those teams, because they all kind of need to work towards something similar. It depends on how the structure is org. So like at ours, we have different product teams under kind of different pillars.
Yes.
And so I would, because I like influencing a strategy.
Yeah.
I know that kind of that's my mid to long term plans.
Nice.
Exit opportunities, I would say quite diverse, because I think the type of thinking that you develop in product management, again, very applicable in consulting. Once again, because you also have to kind of talk to clients, be able to ask questions, be able to develop those relationships. I found that a lot of people in product go into those roles.
To consulting roles.
Into consulting, if they don't want to stay into product. Anything that requires like a good business acumen, working with data, and generally speaking, and doing research, like they would succeed in. Product managers would succeed in. So I would say probably my top answer at the top of my head is consulting.
I'm assuming maybe some people go into operations if they became very good with a certain industry or a certain product and they want to shift to the operations. Do you see that or not really?
At least in my network, I haven't seen that. Too much. I wouldn't be surprised though, just because of the diverse skills that you can build in product. And depending on what industry you're working, you can learn so much to the point where, you might actually just go into a more direct role within it. So I wouldn't be surprised, just because, again, the skill set of a product manager can be so diverse.
Yeah, that makes sense. Last question is, you've been working for around 3 years.
Yeah.
You've worked in Jamaica, UAE, London, in data, product management, and technical product management roles. What advice do you have for young professionals or someone who just graduated to land a job, whether it's product management or in general, like if they want to come in London, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, so I would say the first thing I would say is definitely do your research, right? To kind of understand what you like, what you would really want to do 5 days a week, 9 to 5. And then for London in particular, I think it's super important to kind of network and put yourself out there, especially if you're an immigrant like me. Very, very important just to build that network and to understand what the job market looks like here, because it looks different from year to year. Especially for people coming who are not UK citizens, right? So I would say definitely do your research, definitely network, definitely put yourself out there. So when I say put yourself out there, I mean, yes, apply to jobs, but also let people know you're looking for a job, right? Like on LinkedIn, change your status, because recruiters then reach out to you. Put yourself on sourcing websites where you just get sent to a bunch of companies. Like, I think that's important just because it can be hard to find a job here, right? And in particular for people who are not UK citizens, do your visa research as well. Who sponsors even with your calls, like ask the professionals. Does your company sponsor? Do you know anyone? It's the first question I ask if anyone usually approaches me, and I make it very clear. I think it saves everyone time. And again, on the Gov UK websites, there's a list of all the companies who sponsor. So even if you see one, just download and look, because it will save so much time later. And NYU students in particular, I would also recommend they look at the high potential individual visa that came out last May, because in the UK, exactly, because basically what that allows you to do as an NYU graduate is that you can get your own residence permit for 2 years, or 3 if you did a PhD. Really? And that allows you to work. Which is the ILR. The indefinite leave to remain, is that? No, like it's temporary. It's temporary. It's like a work visa. Work visa. And you can work at any company. But the caveat is you have 2 years or 3 if you did a PhD. Yes. Okay. And then you have to switch. Get a sponsor. Exactly. But the benefit of it is that you can kind of get your feet wet. Indeed. And that makes it easier to transition to like maybe another company who sponsors. So I would just kind of weigh those options and see what would work for you. If you find a company that sponsors you, that's great. If you really want to move to London, but you haven't immediately found a job, try that. An internship wouldn't hurt if you have already the sponsorship and the visa problem sorted out. Exactly. And definitely also a good way to, like to touch on your first point, test what do you want, right? Exactly. Like before you get into like sponsored and you need to like work as a full-time employee. This research phase is important. It's one of the main reasons I started all of this. I feel there's a gap there where
when we get into like graduation mode, I need to find a job, any job. I'm happy with any job.
Yeah.
I think people need to take a step back. I know it's not easy because as a graduate, you really need to find that job.
Yeah.
Even if you're eager to land it directly after, start earlier and throughout uni do your internships and try to do them in different areas so that you can see where do you thrive more. So I think that's a very it's a great tip.
Yeah, I think even during your time in college, like at NYU AD, just spend those summers trying different
stuff.
Like some people know what they want to do, which is fine.
Yeah.
But if you don't, I always recommend to just keep trying, because I think, I used to underestimate, like when you make a choice to be in a job and do something, you're doing that most of your life, right? It should be something that you enjoy doing. And the earlier you kind of figure that out, the more targeted your research and networking and outreach will be. Just based on my experience, I've seen, people kind of bounce between jobs because they don't know what to do. And then it just ends up being difficult, right?
Which is sometimes it has to be the case, like but if you can prevent that, might help you become more senior earlier or find what you like earlier, which might make your life easier, to be honest. I do agree.
I think that's it. I think it's more about just liking what you're doing, right? I think at least at NYU AD, I've seen like this pressure to have to go into like consulting, investment banking, because everyone's doing it, and it's just like, well, would you enjoy doing it? Is it worth it to you? Especially in London, which is like, can be like a hustle and bustle city. I mean, is it worth it to you? And I don't think we really think about that until we're in this situation.
Correct.
So I always encourage people. I'm just like, find out what you like. Even if you're not 100% sure, if you know something seems interesting to you, go for it.
Try it.
Try it. Like, what's the worst? I always say, what's the worst thing that can happen?
That definitely makes sense. Thank you very much, Brandon, for your time. I really appreciate it. Really enjoyed the episode. And don't forget to check out this episode and the next one as well. Thank you for watching.